Hey everyone, this is Belinda Carr. Welcome back to the Boost AEC podcast, where we dive into the world of construction and explore the stories of people and companies who are shaping the future of our industry. We've got yet another exciting podcast for you today. I'm speaking with Amy Marks, Queen of Prefab and Executive VP at Symetri. Thanks for joining us, Amy.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I've wanted you on the podcast for a while now. We've met a couple of times, mainly at the Advancing Prefab conferences. Last year, I believe it was in Phoenix, Arizona,
Yes.
and this year in Denver, Colorado. And you have led the conferences both times, and I've been truly inspired by the confidence you exude up there on stage and how you manage to moderate all the discussions, and you're so knowledgeable about the prefab industry. I'm very excited for this conversation because I think I'm going to learn a lot from you.
All right.
So
I hope so.
you have had a very interesting career. I was looking through your LinkedIn profile and your work experience. You have been a couple of years ago, you were the CEO of Excite Modular, then you moved to Autodesk, and now you're currently at Symetri. So, can you give us a brief overview of your journey through all those companies and how you became such a key figure in the world of prefabrication?
Yeah, I mean, it really starts. I was in the conventional construction world. My family business was conventional construction. Although my dad was and my mom that owned the company were very innovative. They, did some of the first geothermal projects, and they helped rewrite, or actually to write the Construction Management Association of America documentation. My dad was also very involved in that. And so, yeah, my mother ran permits actually for a long time. That's how they got into the business. It was her business that got them in. And I was lucky enough then to have an opportunity to be a minority partner in a company called Coleman, which was a 75-year-old modular steel and concrete manufacturer. And also we were one of the first people to be making bathroom pods in the United States at the time as well. So I went through many different roles of the acquisition, and then through probably every management role there up to president, before I started my own company called Excite, from scratch, I would say, a play on words of offsite at the time. You have to remember, no one was saying the words offsite then. They didn't understand why we named the company Excite. But it was a definite leap of faith into the fact that, we weren't making anything in the beginning. And it was all about consulting with some of the biggest owners on the planet. So we did that for a long time. And as well,
You started
yeah,
that in 2011.
started that. And yeah, right at the end of 2010, 2011.
Wow, that was early on.
And so if you think about the previous company we bought in 2005. So I feel like I'm coming up on what is the 20-year
Wow,
anniversary
yeah.
in this space. So crazy. I'm 53, by the way. I always say I'll be 53 this summer. So I'm just lucky enough that this has been my life so far. But yeah, no. So when I started Excite as a consultant, people were like, "What are you talking about? Are you the architect of record? Are you the engineer of record? What does that do? What does a prefabrication consultant do?" And literally, we had to really make up the process of looking at industry workflows and understanding how to optimize the supply chain, and how to think of new methodologies of working with lean and design build, and how to get design assist with the manufacturers in the room, and things like that. And so we did that for a long time. And of course, I love to build. So we always built data centers and cable landing stations throughout that, really small prefabricated buildings that were very expensive and heavy MEP, until, yeah, Autodesk called and asked me to look at their strategy one day. And I believe I looked at it. It was not what I would have done for a strategy, I think, in this space. And then we sort of started talking, and they were like, "You should come to work for us." And I was like, I don't know if I was like, at the time, I actually didn't even know who Autodesk was, because even though I bought Revit in 2007, I didn't, I only knew them as the brands within the house. I didn't know the house of brands. And so, yeah, it took a
You
couple
mean
of years for
Autodesk
them.
as a company, as opposed to just the
Yeah.
software? Got it.
I knew what Revit was, and I knew what AutoCAD was, obviously, and I knew what other things were. And Navisworks I'd used, in clash detection, even we bought that and did some 3D simulation, 4D simulation. But yeah, I didn't even actually know. It wasn't top of mind for me. I didn't know what AU was. They were like, "You should come to AU," and I said, "What's that?" And I think I came as a guest before I worked there. I came as their guest and got to see what was going on. And then eventually, I think it took about 2 years. I ended up deciding to go work there, and moved over to Autodesk before now moving over to Symetri at one of their largest partners in the role of EVP of Global Strategy here.
So we have to talk about this title, Queen of Prefab. I know I was looking through your website. It's not something that you just came up with. It's something someone awarded you, and the name has just stuck. How early on in your career did people recognize that you were doing something different in the world of prefab?
I mean, I think it's funny. I wouldn't say awarded me the name is the right way to say it, but more like he was embarrassed. He thought he had hired a male CEO to come and speak at his conference, and we were in Asia. And right before, he was like, "Where's your boss? Like, where is he? Where's the CEO we hired?" And I was like, "I'm the CEO you hired." So he went out and introduced me as that. And like my friends started hashtagging it. It was kind of a joke in the beginning. But I think, again, like we've done prefabrication all over the world, from building it here and shipping it all over the world, and then from working all over the world, consulting with some of the largest construction management firms and architecture firms, and mostly with a lot with the owners and governments and things like that. So it was just I don't even think I realized what a 360 view of the world that I was able to get first in the factory that I was a part owner in. I mean, we built everything from telecom to data centers to hospitals to schools to food service to you name it. We built everything, government buildings, all kinds of stuff. So I don't even think I realized that that was special in and of itself. And then to go and then consult on some of the largest projects in the world, the tallest modular building in the world, some of the most complex buildings in the world. I don't know if we ever really knew we were different, maybe. I don't know if that makes sense, but we were just doing our jobs. And I feel like for me, I was just always trying to get a paycheck from my employees every week, maybe, like make sure that they were taken care of and that they could pay their mortgages and I could pay mine. But yeah, I think over the years, I think it's become more and more evident because there really wasn't a lot of language around the space, or there, people weren't saying the words productization or building component productization.
Industrialization.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't even those words. Like I mean, I can't tell you how many hotel rooms I've sat up in the middle of the night and tried to think of the way we're going to describe something to a customer, and talked about the prefabrication continuum. All these types of things that have now seem like they're normal, just didn't exist. They weren't a thing. And I think, yeah, in some ways I love the personal brand. In other ways, I have a lot of other interests in sustainability, and I would say connected data and data strategy and things like that, and platforms. So it's a bit funny. It's a great brand. I love the brand. I love the space, but it is a little bit like being typecast as a child actor when you want to talk about other things.
So much more. Yeah.
Yeah, so much more.
Yeah. And so before we dive into your current role at Symetri, I have to ask you, how has the switch been from owning your own business and being the CEO to working at Autodesk and now at Symetri? Because when you have your own business, yes, it is extremely stressful because you said you're worried about where the next paycheck is coming from,
right.
how you have all these employees to take care of, but you have a certain amount of control over what you're going to do on a daily basis. Oh, I'm passionate about something, let me go figure that out and see
right.
how that can be integrated into my business, as opposed to being a pretty big role at a larger company.
Yes.
How is that switch? How have you dealt with that switch?
I mean, I'll be really frank about it. I think when I first went to Autodesk, look, the same as a woman in the construction space that works internationally, the same characteristics and traits that make you a good CEO in that space are not the same traits and characteristics of success as a manager in technology, or as a vice president, in my case, in technology. So I think that was a bit of a learning curve for me over there, that, they don't speak the way that we speak, and they don't actually, like, again, I was from industry. Of course, I now know technology and love technology as well. And I'm one of those people, I'm neurodivergent. So I just read everything I could possibly read and studied everything I could possibly study to soak it all in. But, it's just, I think that was a bit of a culture shock for me, being an entrepreneur, more so that I came from the construction space and, that heavy, how do I, just the way people talk to each other in that space, and what we're, constantly dealing with, and the pressures, and
it's just a different lingo.
It's just a different world. And so, I can't tell you how many times I would say things like, well, the way it actually works out there, or like, here's what, I'm really interested in as a business owner, or here's the way I would think about losing or making money in that space. And I think, again, that's why Autodesk integrates subject matter experts like me into their ecosystem. And I'm still in the ecosystem as a subject matter expert. So I think, but it is definitely a shock. It's not like the shock you think, where you're like worried about people telling you what to do. But I think things just move slower, and they are more about consensus building, and they're more about
Does
language
this
people
really
use.
align with our goals? Does it?
Yeah, like it's a little bit like you know, sometimes the words become so similar that like I don't even know what the words what they mean. So I would ask people to be like overly descriptive of what they meant, like in what does it smell like?
What does it mean to you?
Yeah.
Because I've
What is
heard
it?
five other
Yes.
people use this term, and everyone uses it in a different context. So, what do you
Yes.
think this word means?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
describe it to me. Like I remember, I think it started in a week one. They were like, and these workflows, and I was like, what does a workflow look like? What do you mean by that? Show me a workflow. And like, oh well, an industry workflow, a technology workflow, like a stakeholder. Like, what are we talking about here? For me, it was like almost like I got there and I was like, wow, this is like sometimes depending on the language, it was like searching for like, you know, a yeti in the forest. Like, do they really exist? Does that thing really exist? Has anyone ever seen that thing that they keep saying over and over again? But I think I started asking people to really, again, describe it to me in my five senses. Like, what does the behavior feel like? What am I actually doing? What is the outcome of that? What is the expected value of something like that? I think you have to really almost like speak a different language. And that's really, I think, was my success at Autodesk. I was a good translator between industry and industries and the technology sector. You never fit in both at that point either. That's the danger. I sort of like, my construction friends were like, it's tech. And my tech friends are like, she's a contractor, So you sort of like, again, don't fit in anywhere. And being a
Yeah.
woman in both spaces is obviously difficult in both tech
That's a
and
whole different
yeah,
layer of
a
difficulty
whole
added
nother
to,
layer.
yeah, added to all
Yeah,
that stuff. Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, we will definitely dive into your role as women in construction, because I'm being in the same kind of boat. I would love to talk to you about that. But let's talk about your current role at Symetri. What is Symetri, and what are you doing at the company?
So Symetri is a consulting firm that focuses on the architecture, engineering, construction, manufacturing, owner space, like all that ecosystem in the built environment, basically. And our headquarters is actually in Sweden, and we are partners with some very fantastic third parties like Autodesk, and we also work with Bluebeam and other technology companies that small and large. But we really pride ourselves on setting ourselves apart as a true strategic business advisor to our customers. So you can buy a lot of those products, but there are a lot of gaps in connecting those products, and so we've actually figured out how to connect those gaps with not just the technology that exists out there, but we actually own our own technology. So we fill a lot of the gaps with our own technology that we invest in or partner with or build ourselves. And I would say, our focus is around sustainability and creating a better world in a lot of the ways and being very passionate about change. So, they are really servicing customers large and small in the ecosystem around all of those areas, basically.
So, as executive VP at the company, do you have to travel a lot to different companies around the world to advise them on how to use certain software or how to use Symetri software?
Sure. I mean, it's funny. I don't really feel like my role changed very much from Autodesk to this job, to be honest. It's pretty much
Just
the same
natural.
role. It's just at a different company. And even though my title is a little bit broader here. But I think, yeah, I meet with customers sometimes in person, sometimes, virtually, obviously. But it's about, growth, I would say, in reality. It's like, how do people grow their businesses? What's the right strategy to look at for resiliency and for growth and for, you know, um, future proofing everything they're trying to do, but really also like just how do they make money today that's just more productive. So I do a lot of strategy with our customers with our own strategic intent, with our own company of what we're trying to accomplish and what we want to do in our business units and working with different parts of the industry. So it's a lot of travel. It's a lot of, I find it very interesting. For me, it's like solving a million puzzles every single day and connecting a million dots every single day. So for me, it keeps me very interested all the
You
time.
seem to be the kind of person who wants to learn something new every day. You need a
Oh,
challenge. You
100%.
need, otherwise you're just going to be bored out of your mind. And
Yeah.
I have the same kind of tendencies too, which is
Yes.
why I
It's just the
started
way
a
my brain
podcast
works.
and started YouTube. And
Yeah,
it's
of
just,
course. Like you have to.
yeah, I have to
Why
keep
not?
busy. I have to, otherwise it's just, you're just going through the motions day after
Right.
day. And what are you really doing to better yourself and better the industry you're in? So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it sounds like right now are you just consulting to AEC firms or other technology firms as well?
Oh, no. So we actually, not just the AEC firms, but also we work with a lot of the manufacturing side. So we also at Symetri own a company called Team D3, which is a Symetri company. And they're probably the largest consultant in the manufacturing space in the United States, working with like heavy manufacturers and process and plant and things like that for around things like, PLM and connected data and things like CPQ, and building, not just, again, not just like, selling other people's software, but our own building integrations that don't exist. So things like, so again, we're on that, even like the app dev side, but also, staff augmentation. We do a tremendous amount of staff augmentation for VDC. So we're acting as the VDC arm for many companies around the United States and throughout Europe. So we do tons of training and implementation. So we have live trainers that are working with companies to try to get the best out of software like, the Autodesk Construction Cloud or, Fusion or anything, Revit, even, all of those products and everything that we touch. So I think we're very service oriented in what we're providing to people in many of the different spaces. Look, we work with some of the largest owners on the planet as well, and helping them understand, tying in their stakeholders into a much more cohesive, move forward on things like consulting for projects and their enterprises. So yeah, it's pretty exciting and interesting.
Yeah,
And
it's
of
cool
course, I
that you're
work a lot
getting
with
to do
Autodesk.
things. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't feel like you actually left Autodesk. This is just a natural progression of your career. That's awesome.
absolutely. I mean, I feel a little bit like it's great. Autodesk is going through their, into becoming a platform company and much more open. And I'm sort of like, I feel like I got a little bit of a head start on that in the sense that like that was a big part of, my thought leadership around platform at Autodesk. But I have so many more toys to play with in the world, all the time now. So, and I can move it, a little bit quicker when we want to. But again, and still also the Autodesk, like fantastic platforming toys. So for me, it's just exponentially, gotten greater in the sense of experiences and learning and connecting things and more products and more people and also more customers. At Autodesk, I worked a lot with the top tier customers. Here, I get to work with, every type of customer, which for me is much more interesting, I think.
From small companies to large companies
Yeah, all
in
the way
all
up.
different industries.
The same guys I worked with at Autodesk, all the way down to like a small manufacturer or subcontractor, mechanical contractor of a small nature. Yeah, it's great for me.
That's awesome. So you have, like we've talked about all these different things. You're obviously not just the queen of prefab. You're touching all these other different
Yes.
areas of not just construction as well. Is there a particular project that comes to mind if I ask you, like the most memorable project that you've worked on? Something that was a hurdle that either changed the way you thought about construction or changed maybe your entire career path. It could be something at Excite or even something more recent.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I mean, when I was it's probably like a few things come to mind, but like the first thing that popped in my head, I mean, I did a very long stint for a customer in the semiconductor space, the big one that everybody talks about pretty much, but like one of the majors. And we were on that project for about 2 years when I owned Excite. I would fly back and forth into Hillsboro and Oregon and other places like Arizona. And it was just fantastic. Like it was being able to work in a different way at a different level with really fantastic people that were very innovative. And again, like it was an IPD type project at the time. And although I will say I'm a lean manufacturing fan, I am trained in lean construction, but I'm not always a fan of the IPD contracting methodology, to be honest, but for several reasons around my IC space. But it just was such a comprehensive project and we learned so much on it. And we were able to, take what we learned and create different frameworks for other customers out of it. Because it was just a long project that was very
Was that
expansive.
the project in Chandler?
We did a few different ones.
Okay.
Like we did some, I don't know how much I can talk about it, but we set the standards, I would say, like for many of the projects that were moving forward. And that was very interesting as well. With the first time, I think a customer of ours was like, look, we don't want to keep designing things differently every time. So how do we create standards around many of these very complex assemblies so that we can just decouple them from process and create products out of them? And I remember we actually did an analysis on some costs, and I'll never forget, like myself and at the time, my partner at the company was, we took some of the like thousands of Excel spreadsheets home and we were trying to analyze them and understand some things. And I think we really dug into some things and realized with data, we could prove out some really cool things. Like the more you were able to productize and componentize a kit of parts, there, because a semiconductor fab facility is so big, you could compare one area to the other, one that was highly productized to one that wasn't, one that had a lot of free issue equipment to one that didn't, and I think it was, one that had highly prescriptive specifications versus, performance specifications. It was just sort of like a playground, if you will, in so many ways. And I just think, like, again, more data, more learning. It was like, it's just a fantastic project. I met fantastic people on it as well. And I was, like, at one point, out of 80 people on the project, I think I was the only woman. My guys pointed out to me for a very long time. There was a lot of women in the beginning of that project, but I know that we got a few more after a while. So I think impactfully for me, it was a lesson of how to stand out, and that's okay. And, just a lot of learning, so robust. We learned so much on it,
I think this would be the perfect segue into your role as a woman, a leader of the women in the construction industry. It is very tricky to do what you do, because if you're timid and quiet, like unfortunately I am, I'm trying to get over that, and I'm looking at people like you as role models. Then you get lost in the crowd, because we're in a
right?
male-dominated industry with pretty loud voices. But if you're too loud, then it's like, how dare you have such a loud voice? How dare you call
Yes,
yourself Queen of Prefab? How dare you
100%.
think you've earned that when you don't have the experience I do? How do you balance that? Because I think you do it really well.
Do you?
I do.
Sometimes I don't think I do it so well. But yeah, no. There might be varying opinions on whether or not I do it so well, depending on who you ask. But I mean, it is like walking a tightrope, right? Like, so it's especially, for women, like, I just feel like, again, like, I know what it feels like. I am not of color, obviously, like, but I know what it feels like to walk in a room and not look like anybody else. Like, I do, and not talk like anybody else. I know what that, at least the closest thing I could imagine that might feel like, right? So again, like, I don't know. I think I really never cared, to be honest. Like, I just don't have that personality. Like, my father and my mom was a Hawaiian Ironman triathlete, like in her 60s. My dad was,
I'm sorry,
first
she
it was
was a
kind
what?
she did the Hawaiian Ironman, like,
Oh,
triathlon
Hawaii.
in her
Oh, wow.
60s, like, they're both gone now, my parents, but they were both, like, super innovative and, like, in your face, kind of competitive, athletic, business savvy entrepreneurs, both of them. I just wasn't raised to actually really care what people think, to be honest. And that wasn't, and it really spun me off on my own very early on in life. So, like, to be honest, like, I had to figure out things for myself, but that was my early upbringing. I just didn't care so much, to be honest. And it hurt me in a lot of ways. Like, I will tell you, there are people out there that probably think, like, I'm not the most likable person. I remember we had customers that were international customers, and they ran into one of my project managers in the airport, and they were like, "Man, your CEO, she is a tough," whatever the word came next. and, and then he said, "I mean, she has to work with people like you every day. Like, what do you think
That's the
she should
next
be like?"
badge of honor you need to wear.
Yeah, it was like,
I'm a
"What
tough.
do you think she should talk like?" She's tough. And I think now, in my, maybe as I'm getting in my, again, I'm turning 53, like, would I have handled things exactly the same way every single time, knowing what I know now at 53? No, but I mean, that's the benefit of, like, hindsight. I didn't
Hindsight,
have it then.
exactly.
And I probably wouldn't be where I am if I didn't act that way in those places. So, I think it's really tough for women. I think I would say now what's even tougher is that, and this is maybe shocking to you, but women my age, in their, like, late 40s and 50s, are now, I feel like there's a big backlash against smart women that have made it in the space. And it's sort of like now they've taken all that HR politically correct lingo, and now the language they put in for male CEOs to let other people speak or to make other people feel safe, they're sort of using that against women in my category. And they're like, "Oh, she's a bully," or, "Oh, she makes me feel psychologically unsafe," or it's like all these things that, like, we were supposed to, like, speak out and advocate for ourselves. It's like those things are not okay anymore. And I don't love that. Like, I think a lot of my friends are encountering that. They had to, again, to get where they are, they had to be very, um, you know,
Adopt the
authentic to who
aggressive.
they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It,
Like, and
it's
again,
it's really interesting that you say that. So a couple of years ago, I read a book by Nina Desai called "Playing with the Boys Club" or something like that. And back then, I thought that was an extremely informative book, and I got a lot of good lessons from it. And then last year, or a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, I saw that that book is denounced now because it's too
Can't say
aggressive.
boys club
I
anymore.
can't
Yeah.
say- and
Yeah.
it's not, it doesn't provide good advice, and I'm just like, maybe let's just take things with some perspective. Like
Yeah.
that, the person, the author Nina, grew up in a different time, had to
Yeah.
deal with things her own way, and that's what worked for her, and these are
Yeah.
the lessons that she hopes to impart onto the next generation. If it doesn't
Agreed.
work for you, it doesn't work for you. You don't have to bash that particular author just because you don't take that, you don't think those lessons are valuable to you.
Right.
So I kind of understand what you're saying.
Yes, it's like it's swung the way opposite direction, in my opinion, to be honest. I think it's swung way too far in that space. I always say to people, like, if in your organization, every one of your programs for women in leadership or women at your company is about they should find their voice and they have to, like, learn how to speak out. And it's like, do you assume I don't have a voice? Like when all of the training is about me finding my voice and me being comfortable being my authentic self and me to speak out, it's like you somehow or empower yourself. I'm like, I already have a voice. I already have power. I don't need anyone else to tell me that I have a voice or power. But yet all of the training is around that, right? And it's like overcoming this, this need to speak out. I think it's done a disservice to women that actually feel powerful and act powerful and have that voice. And it's made it very difficult for them to continue to be successful. It's like I keep hearing people saying, like, oh, we want people to be their authentic selves. And then I ask my next question is, how good are you at training your organization as of accepting of people's authentic selves? Like, what do you do that kind of training? Like, if my authentic self happens to be an outspoken, neurally diverse, like, construction talking
Are
tough
you saying that I
woman,
can't be who I
like,
am?
can
Yeah.
I not be that anymore? Like, why is that not okay anymore? Like, so I feel like we have to really like accept people for their authenticity and their lead with curiosity of like why and where they came from, because it makes perfect sense. If look, I'm a competitive rugby player for 15 years who worked in New York as a contractor. Like, I'm not soft. It's just there's no part of me that's soft. There's no part of me that has, probably like in my Gallup Strength Finder, I think harmony was last and empathy was, second to last of my traits. And that's just not who I am. You know what I mean? So it's okay. By the way, I'm okay that harmony is not my first trait. I surrounded myself with people that had harmony in their first top 5. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's for me. It's very disappointing. It swung the opposite direction now. I feel like for me.
How do you deal with that in your day to day, and how do you think you're going to deal with it for the rest of your career? Is it you trying to adapt to this new changing world, new changing environment, or do you think it is best for you to just continue being who you are, because you have established yourself in this
Right.
industry and you probably have an idea of what you want to do with
Yes.
the remaining 20 years or
Right.
more?
Well, I hope I don't have. I mean, I'm working. I don't know if I want more than 20 years at this point, but I maybe 20. I mean, I
Oh,
think, look,
you'd
at the
get
end of
bored
the
out of your mind. You
yeah, I
can't
mean,
be, you
at
couldn't
the end of the
retire.
day, it's very hard for you not to be yourself.
Yeah.
That's just factual. Like, it takes more effort for me to try to not be myself than just for me to be myself and to be cognizant. Look, I've had some really good coaching. Like, again, with my brain functions differently. And like, I have some mitigations that I remind myself to say to people, like, that's not a direction. I'm making a suggestion to you as an example. Like, I kind of came up with a few phrases to put people at ease with my coach, like almost like playing cards. When I recognize that people are uncomfortable around me, how can I make them feel more comfortable? And how do I, because usually they're uncomfortable about what I'm saying or what's on the outside, but my intention is usually to help them or to protect them or whatever. So I find that, like, I try to lead verbally with my intention and articulate my intention to people, more so over communicate that. And then also to, lead with curiosity, ask questions as much as I can. But like, again, I'm okay with, I absolutely hate the phrase, I'm sure you've already thought of this. Like, I hate that they teach women to say that. I'm like, it's perfectly fine for you to have your own unique thoughts that nobody else has thought about, just for the record. You don't actually have to give everybody credence to the room that maybe they thought of it first. Like, I just think that's absurd. Like, I just don't love the way they're training us as women to behave. It's like, and again, not that some of that
Yeah.
doesn't work, like, I'm not saying it doesn't work, unfortunately, but it's just not so, like, I felt like when I said to my coach at one point, if I feel like after I speak, I have to go up and take a shower and wash off the yuckiness of not being myself, I'm not saying that. Like, I just can't, like, I can't do it. And then I'm not in the right place. You know what I mean? So I'll go
Yeah.
someplace else.
So when you say that you think of things differently, are you a lot more analytical and logical in the way you perceive things, perceive a situation, perceive a company, perceive a boardroom, as opposed to, I'm not sure. Like for me, I think I know this whole left brain, right brain thing has been completely debunked, but I think
Yeah.
I'm more on the less on the artistic side, more on the logical side. Are you the same way?
I actually, of all the sort of assessments I've ever taken, whether it's like Berkman, which I absolutely love the Berkman assessment, or Hogan, or Gallup Strength Finder, and my brain actually works in the extremes, right? So like every time I take a test of like that, they're like, oh my God, we've never seen the results like that. Like it's so far, like as an example, like so far extroverted, but your needs are so far introverted, like, or like you're so analytical, like so data driven, and yet you can actually understand people's emotions and you speak from a place of creativity. Like mine were like way on the opposite sides of the spectrum of every single one of the catalysts like that they would talk about. And so for me, that's hard, right? So it's like hard to be like out in front of thousands of people and then feel like you need to have a quiet one-on-one conversation. Like people don't understand that about me. They think I'm always like on outgoing, I'm actually not, like a lot of times at home. My daughter actually gives me adventure points sometimes when I leave the house, I would say, like, because I'm like, I just need a little like recharge.
I would have
But
never guessed that.
yeah, like I don't think people think of me like that. Like I don't love crowds. I don't like big things like outside of work. So like I think for me it was more, my skill set is about mapping those two things together. So like I feel like I do see things differently from I can map 1,000 different data points in my head, like kind of saying, and like I can remember, most people know that I can remember a million conversations I've had and like what I was wearing and what was on the board. I can close my eyes and kind of see what was written on things and from years ago and stuff like that. So I think my brain's just really good at mapping things more so than anything else, and connecting things and connecting dots and people and seeing how things would fit together. Like I'm constantly gamifying in my head all the time, just constantly cycling through my head different things all the time. That becomes somewhat noisy some days, and other days, I love it. So it depends. It depends, like just like the two extremes. Sometimes it's too much, and other times I'm like, wow, can't get enough of it.
Yeah. Wow,
Probably
that's
for me.
fascinating. That's amazing how you have embraced all of that stuff. You're like, yeah, this is who I am, and maybe that just comes with age because that's the way I am now. I'm like, okay, I am an introvert. I will do YouTube videos and podcasts and stuff because I love one-on-one conversations.
Yeah,
But yeah, I'm an introvert. Why would I deny that? I'm going to deal with it in my own way in public.
right.
Yeah.
100%. I
Yeah.
think people, when I always laugh when people are like, what do you do for fun? And I was like, wait, what? Like, I don't even understand the question. Like, so I always like, like obviously I'm a mom in my spare time, but my daughter plays competitive rugby as well now. And she's a high level rugby player in high school. And I love to cook. And like, like people think of me, like, how is that even like, I love my happy day is going to watch my daughter play rugby, the farmer's market, and making food and staying home. Like I would say like that and watching something on Netflix. Like that's probably my ideal day. So I think most people who know me would like, and the work life would be like, that is not possible that is your ideal day. And I'm like, no, 100%. That's my, like my ideal day would probably be that. So
It was fascinating talking to you, Amy. And usually it's hard to get even a second of your time at those conferences because everyone's pulling you in all these directions and everyone wants to talk to you. So I'm so glad you came on the podcast and I absolutely love talking to you. But before you go, I have to ask you.
sure.
I try to ask all my podcast guests this. What advice would you have for a young professional who wants to change the industry the way you have? I know it's a completely different generation now and they're going to find their own way, but there has to be some sort of common thread between the way you have done it and maybe some advice that you would have for them to carve their own
Yeah.
path.
I always tell like people that ask me about their jobs, young people, I'm like, think about everything that you'd like to do during like a day, like don't think about like your next role or like what your next title is going to be. It's like, what are the things that you absolutely love doing every day? Do you love spreadsheets? Do you love talking to people? Do you love creating frameworks? Do you love, doing podcasts? Like think about what those things are. And then also think about the non-negotiables that you absolutely do not want to ever do. Like I never want to be a project manager ever again. I never want to do that. Right. It's not for me. So, and think about things that like, if you are paid well enough, you might do a few things like, and then from there you can map together like, and talk to a million people and ask them like, if I love to do these things, what is the right place for me in this space? Right. And like, of course I would tell them, try to pick the place that's less traveled. There's, especially if you're of color and women and younger and you don't fit in, and I've always been told I don't fit in anyone's box, especially if you don't fit in anyone's box, seek out things that don't fit in anybody's box and like
Create
align
your own.
yourself with
Yeah.
all those things. Like, I think that's why there's a lot of women in the lean movement. You know, they were like, oh, that lean thing, go send her over there, learn, or I'll go over to the lean thing. So it's like always, I'm always surprised at the disproportionate amount of women in like in some of the things like lean construction or, things
The
like
whole
that for that reason.
carbon counting, my
Oh yeah,
gosh, that is
so many women.
predominantly female. Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, it's new. There's things that we need. I mean, we're mothers. I think we have like some sort of like, we want the earth to be there for our children, just inherently. Not that dads don't feel the same way. I'm sure they do, but we're sort of like wired in that way. And yeah, I feel like go to the place that's less traveled, but also that, you're really excited about and that suits your, things that bring you joy and passion every single day. Like think about that. That's more than a title, more than a company. Surround yourself with people that understand you and accept you and allow you to do those things every single day.
Well, that was excellent advice, Amy. Thanks again for being on the podcast, and I'm looking forward to seeing everything you accomplish at Symetri and beyond, because you
Awesome.
have so much potential. You have accomplished so much, and truly, I look up to you.
Oh,
I
you're so sweet.
I really admire your confidence, and seeing you up on stage there at the Advancing Prefab conferences, I was like, wow, I wonder if I'd get there someday.
You're here
So,
now. Look at
yeah,
you're interviewing me.
yes.
Like you're already there.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Amy. Thanks again for
Well,
being on
good.
our podcast.
Anytime. Thanks so much.